evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for today's session of the Regal Live Series. Regal Live Series is a weekly live series that aims to enable coaches to build a prosperous coaching business by becoming the best coaches that they can be. Regal Unlimited is a leadership development company that has over a decade of excellence in disrupting leadership development through coaching and coach training. In this edition of the Regal Live Series, we have our own John Serrao with us. John is the managing partner of Serrao and Associates. He brings more than 30 years of experience in finance, marketing, sales, legal, administration, training facilitation, and coaching, to name a few areas. He is a fellow member of various prestigious professional institutions like the Institute of Cost Accountants of India, Institute of Company Secretaries of India. He is an ICF MCC coach and a certified mentor coach from Invite Change USA. He has a rich corporate and consulting experience, having closely worked with many Fortune 500 companies. Thank you, John, for joining us today. The topic for today
Thanks,
is
Anirud. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
The topic for today is how can a practicing coach keep their coaching quotient high? To start with, John, I would like you to reflect on what does coaching quotient mean to you?
Okay. Thanks, Anirud, for that question. So, when I think about coaching quotient, I'm reminded about competency two, which is embodies a coaching mindset. And if I look at the marker in question, it says that it's a mindset that is open, curious, flexible, and client-centered. And then it adds to that. It says it's a process that requires ongoing learning and development, establishing a reflective practice, and preparing for sessions. Right? So that is what the competency, the marker says. And if I look at the competency, one of the things I have realized in coaching is that while we have many coaching competencies, and while I am of the belief that some probably are probably in importance a little higher than the other. Like, for example, for me, I place a lot of importance on coaching presence, for example, right? And that coaching presence is required in the entire coaching conversation. And to my mind, embodying a coaching mindset is a metaphor of coaching presence that we require to embody in our life, right? Not only in a coaching conversation, but also in aspects that are outside of our coaching realm, right? And to that extent, it requires us that we need to, and in fact, the second competency there says engages in ongoing learning and development as a coach. And therefore, we need to constantly keep learning as coaches. And to me, so that's one part, both learning about coaching, but also learning about your own self, being self-aware of who you are, where you are in the coaching process, and what are the ways that you are becoming better in embodying those mindsets in your life. So that's what, it's a overarching objective of sorts.
So, John, just to pick up the thread from what you just shared, you ended your line of thought with bringing it to the personal life. Now, it is very difficult. What I personally see is that it's very easy to have a coaching mindset, to have a non-judgmental presence during that 1 hour to 90 minutes of coaching conversation. Ironically, our judgments are triggered the most with our close ones.
Yes.
So how would you encourage us to maintain a coaching mindset even in interpersonal conversations?
Yeah, so that's a good question, Anirudh. So I'm not saying that we will not have the temptation to judge, because we all, of necessity, the moment we see somebody, a judgment arises in our head, right? Can we be aware of the fact that we are judging another person in that moment, whether it's a close family member or a complete stranger? And then how do we try to be, what the Buddhists call equanimity, or I don't know what the verb for that is, in that situation?
Sthitaprajna.
Yeah. How do we stay in that position where we are just observing somebody without attaching labels of any kind to that person. And the beauty about the work that we do, Anirudh, as coaches, is that we have opportunities to develop these muscles outside a coaching conversation. You may have 1 hour of a coaching conversation, you have 23 other hours to practice coaching mindset. It's available to you 365 days of the year. And all of us coaches need to take advantage of that. Because, how do we show up in a coaching conversation if we haven't practiced being that coach outside? It's hard, I know. But that's the challenge before all of us coaches. That's the coaching quotient that we all need to adopt.
That's brilliant. 23 hours of practice for that 1 hour of a coaching conversation.
Yeah, yeah.
Something that I have gotten from a lot of our coaches during peer practice sessions initially was that, and beyond, it is so tiring to be present and non-judgmental, like so emotionally draining, especially when the client brings in a situation that is very, that comes too close to the home base. So how do you manage on one side, as you mentioned, be aware that there's a judgment that's coming up, but the emotional and mental drain that you feel during the session while being drawn into the situation and post the session when you are processing the situation?
Yeah, that's another good question, Anirudh. The first time, I remember the first time I did a training program, this was more than 20 years ago. I don't know, maybe 25 years ago. I was so tired, it was unbelievable. But over the years, I've gone to a point where I've done 5-day workshops, one day after the other. And so, just like when you go to the gym, the first time you'll be tired, but then over a period of time, you learn to lift heavier weights and more weights and do more aerobic activity, and you feel fine. It's just that and that's why we have those 23 hours on it. So we need to practice. And as you start doing more of it, I'm sure you will be able to get a better sense of, a coaching conversation.
So, John,
And
at the risk
hopefully
of
you'll
saying,
come out less emotionally tired or physically tired than before.
so at the risk of sounding silly, is it more natural to be judgmental and not present, or the opposite?
I think, see, we are never born into this world like Buddhas, right? We don't come out of our mother's womb in a trance like state, right? We are completely, our minds are like crazy, helter skelter, going judgmental. We judge others, others judge us. So it's a process. But here we're talking, and if I had to lean on the work of Daniel Goleman, he talks about, can we be self-aware and thereby regulate ourselves? And the second part of what he talks about is that can we be aware of the other person and then regulate the relationship? And so we need to be able to first learn to be self-aware. And as we become self-aware, practice that when we meet up people and see what the impact of what we do is on them and learn how to manage their relationship. So it's a skill. It's a skill like leadership, for example. Nobody is born a leader, but we develop those skills. So we need to be intentional about practicing this. We need to be intentional about what is going on within us and what might be going on with the other person. And then being able to figure out how do we manage that, manage ourselves and manage that relationship and the space in between.
So, John, thank you for bringing Daniel Goldman's work in this conversation. So, I'm very curious because of a particular word you used, because it has certain connotations. You use the word regulate, as Daniel says. So, isn't regulate a more imposed way of functioning rather than naturally functioning?
So when you say naturally, what does it naturally mean to you, Anil?
So, when I say regulate, I would say that it's not spontaneous. There is a quick millisecond evaluation of the situation, looking at the best possible outcome, and then responding based on that. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
go to
So if you
reaction
think
versus
about it,
response.
yeah, yeah. So the fact of the matter is that we all come from that state of reacting to situations. Our amygdala is constantly scanning the environment for threats. And and when we talk about threats today, they may not be physical threats, but they are definitely social threats, right? And one of those threats is the threat of judgment. I coach many people who are so caught up with what others will think about them, and they freeze. They don't talk in meetings, they don't share. And therefore, to an extent, because of the way we have evolved, we most times we react to situations, but that's how we are trained. That's a natural response. But when we become aware of that, we can actually learn how to regulate that. And I'm hoping that over a period of time, learn to soothe our amygdala to a point where we can actually, this can be a natural response for us.
That is an uphill climb to arrest
It is.
amygdalas.
Anirudh, life is an uphill climb. Just not in coaching, but if I look at coaching is a microcosm of what life represents. But there is a bigger role here. So are you able to hear me?
So
Is this
I can hear you, yes.
okay? Okay.
So if I just tie it back to the initial conversation on bringing the competencies to the personal level. So my next question is related, but it may be straying away a bit, but it's a personal example. Uh, a dear friend of mine, he was opening up to me about when you mentioned the judgment, right? That's when it came up. He was opening up to me how he knows the answer in the meeting situation, but past experience has led him to not open up anymore. And he has become silent, doesn't open up anymore. And when he mentioned this to me, then I asked him, then he told me that he's seeing a professional, talking to a professional for overcoming this, because it has affected him deeply. I offered to coach him. Then he mentioned that I respected that he wanted someone who he doesn't know. So as a friend, so given that there is clearly a strong judgment with the coaching mindset.
Anirudh, I lost you for a moment. So can you just,
Yeah.
yeah, the last part I
So, so,
missed out. Yeah.
so right now, what he needs, as per my understanding, is a coaching conversation like conversation where he can just be himself.
Yeah.
But he's
Okay.
clearly not open to the idea of getting coached.
Okay.
So, as a friend, all of us in the community who are coaches, how can we be there for a friend who clearly needs help and is taking help? But how can we be that support
Yeah.
from a
So the
coaching
thing,
standpoint?
yeah. So, if you look at the basic fundamental of coaching, it's all a partnership, Anirudh. And if someone does not want to be coached, there is nothing that you can do, right? And much as you may see that he has a problem, and much as you may want to help, you have done your bit by offering that help. If he doesn't want to be coached, you can't help him. The only thing you can be is to be there for him. And should he feel comfortable enough, he might one day reach out to you and then hopefully seek you out and get coached on the subject. I don't know whether that answers your question.
Just to build on that, for me, how can we as coaches be that support, right? Even if we're not coaching actively, but just bringing in that presence, just bringing
Yes,
in those competencies and be that
correct.
support. How can we do that?
Which is, and then it takes us back to where we started off on coaching quotient, right? That even if you can't coach somebody, can you still demonstrate the other competencies? Can you listen? Can you be present? Can you hold
Mm.
him in? what we call as unconditional positive regard? Can you continue to be authentic with him? Right? That's what is called for. And in many ways, this is the practice that we're talking about in a non-coaching environment that can stand you in good stead, even in a coaching environment.
23 hours versus that 1 hour.
Yes, very much. You can sleep for 8 hours, so minus that. 15 hours.
That's what 1 hour. So, John, given the amygdala, we spoke about the amygdala and the judgment. So, one thing that coaches were starting off in their coaching business, there is competencies, the coaching conversation on one side, and there's the business on the other side. And as you mentioned, threat perception, social threat, the pressure of presenting that you're doing well. So the focus of the business takes up so much that many of us ignore that the fulcrum is the coaching competencies, the coaching quotient. So when there is two equally powerful, I would say, not poles apart, but parallel lines in the thought process, how do you manage them so that you know it's a balance?
Yeah. That's a good question, to ask. That sometimes in our quest to get business, we might compromise on our offering, and if we compromise on our offering, then it is actually a vicious circle that can actually compromise on our on the subsequent business that we get. And if I had to lean first, I would first lean on people becoming better coaches and working on their skills, because that's the training that we have to kind of take to heart, become better coaches, and at the same time continue to work on our BD and marketing activities. But because you are the product and you are the service, if you are not able to deliver, then regardless of how good your marketing is, it's not going to translate into business. So it's to my mind, it's an absolute must that you need to be working on yourself in terms of coaching.
So, John, in our
Let me
previous
ask you a
few, yeah,
question. Is my screen very dark because my light just went off? Can I just take a moment to just switch that light off? Can you give me just a
yes, yes,
second?
please, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. Yeah, okay, it's better. Sorry, go ahead.
So, John, in our previous few series, because we are close to, we just have 2 minutes left. So, we had the other mentor coaches of Coaching Unlimited also pitch in their thoughts, and we also had a couple of former participants. Now, I would like you to weigh in, and I would request you to have it as an unfiltered conversation. How does Coaching Unlimited help coaches improve their coaching quotient? Just a quick background to that question would be we have just finished getting credentials, probably. So we would think that we already know the competencies. Familiarity breeds that. And since I'm anyway practicing the coaching competencies and my understanding in a coaching conversation, what is the need for me to revisit the competencies in an engagement like coaching on the model? You could reflect on that.
Yeah, so that's a good question, and the way I would like to answer it is to liken it to a game that I'm very passionate about called golf. I've been playing the sport for more than 30 years, and I'm still learning the sport. And coaching in many ways is like that. There is so much to learn in this thing or this profession called coaching. And like in golf, it is very easy for you to slip into bad habits, right? And sometimes you need somebody to be able to work with, to be able to point you out to those bad habits. I've got one of the players who used to play for in India and the Indian circuit and in the Asian circuit, who currently coaches me. I've been going to him for coaching for 2 years now. I had to redo my entire game, so it's like I had to revisit all the coaching competencies. It has been difficult. It has been demotivating. But today I've hit some great shots, and it feels like this is all coming back together. So I realize the power that there is in constantly keeping yourself updated, not only in golf, but also a skill like coaching, right? And therefore, something like what Coaching Unlimited is trying to do now, it could be one of the ways that participants can actually, coaches can become better, but it's not the only way. There are other ways that they can do peer coaching, for example. They can look at having somebody mentor them, for example. They can actively work on being aware of, or a practice of reflection after the session. So there are a number of things that they can do to sharpen their skills, just not one thing or one intervention that can help. It's a constant looking at yourself.
John, this conversation itself was a very coaching conversation-like experience for me.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
just to anchor the golf analogy for the fans of cricket and basketball, like myself, like Sachin Tendulkar, and in basketball, my icon for me it's Kobe Bryant. Right, Kobe, his work ethic, he has already taken so many shots even before the Lakers would reach the court. And as you mentioned, 30 years into the game, and you still there's so much to do.
Yes.
So in a coaching conversation, maybe it's that one shot that can be the transformation for the client.
Yeah.
So thank you, John, for taking the time out to be with us today. Thank you, dear
Thanks.
viewers.
Thanks,
As you can
Abhishek.
see on the screen, we have the upcoming edition of Coaching Unlimited in Mumbai. So please feel free to reach out to us at info@regalunlimited.com, and we are happy to help. Thank you, John. Thank you, dear viewers. See you next week for our next edition of Regal Lives.
Bye.